Today we are going to tell you about Escape and Chase, but before, don't forget to like and share. Stay with movies. The police operation began with a determined team focused on combating property crimes, concentrating on Sao Paulo, particularly the north and south zones. The primary target of the operation was an area where young people frequently gathered with stolen motorcycles, engaged in drug activities, and performed dangerous vehicle maneuvers. The cold and overcast weather did not deter the officers, who were ready to recover stolen vehicles and apprehend those involved in criminal activities. During the patrol, the team approached an individual on a motorcycle. Tension escalated when he was questioned about the motorcycle's origin. The man, without any documents, could not explain where the vehicle came from, raising suspicion. With unclear information and inconsistent statements, the suspect was detained and taken to the police station. Throughout the process, he attempted to justify himself, but the officers, already familiar with similar situations, realized something was amiss. A background check revealed prior criminal records, confirming suspicions of his involvement in crimes. Another suspect was stopped, and his motorcycle also caught the officers' attention due to signs of tampering. When questioned, the man could not provide valid documents and was also taken to the station. At this point, another detail stood out. The motorcycle he was riding had visible alterations to its chassis and identification numbers, suggesting it was likely stolen. During the operation, another stop was made on a motorcycle with a scratched-off serial number and no plates. The two occupants, one of whom was underage, were detained and taken to the station for questioning. The motorcycle was seized, and the officers determined it would undergo detailed forensic examination to verify its origin. In total, the motorcycles and suspects detained raised more questions about vehicle trafficking and theft operations in the area. Determined to delve deeper, the officers continued their investigation. At another moment, a young man on a powerful imported motorcycle was stopped. The motorcycle also showed signs of tampering, and the rider was unlicensed. He was detained, and the motorcycle was seized for further forensic analysis. This vehicle, lacking proper documentation and with clear signs of illegal modifications, was another key piece of evidence that it was likely stolen. The team, recognizing the gravity of the situation, seized the motorcycle for a more detailed examination to verify its exact origin and determine if it was linked to other thefts in the region. As the suspects were transported, another police team encountered a group of minors on two motorcycles. The bikes had no plates and displayed scratched-off serial numbers, indicating they might have been stolen or altered. The minors, without documents, were detained, and a more in-depth investigation began to determine the motorcycle's origins and whether the youths were involved in illegal activities such as drug trafficking. The operation continued, with more motorcycles being seized throughout the day. In one seizure, a man was caught riding a high-powered motorcycle that also showed signs of tampering and lacked the necessary documents.
Hey you who are watching a movie. I see that you didn't leave your like and didn't subscribe to the channel. Give me this strength for me to bring more content to you. Thank you.
The motorcycle was immediately seized, and the suspect, who had no license, was charged with driving without a license and possession of an altered vehicle. During interrogation, some of the detainees tried to argue that they had borrowed the motorcycles or were unaware of the tampering, but the evidence against them was clear. One of the seized motorcycles had been reported stolen in earlier records, and the police managed to connect those involved to a local gang that operated vehicle thefts and used the motorcycles to commit other crimes, such as drug trafficking and armed robberies. The operation, which involved dozens of police officers across various parts of Sao Paulo, resulted in the seizure of several stolen vehicles, the arrest of individuals with criminal records, and the identification of a larger scheme involving trafficking and receiving stolen vehicles. The officers remained vigilant, ready to continue their investigations and dismantle more parts of the gang. By the end of the day, the police team felt a sense of accomplishment. They had faced a complex situation, dealt with experienced criminals, and successfully prevented more stolen vehicles from being used in further crimes. However, they knew the work was far from over. The next step would be to deepen the investigation into the gang and ensure the recovered motorcycles and cars were returned to their rightful owners. The operation was a success, but represented only one chapter in the ongoing battle against crime in the city. As the suspects were escorted to the police station, the officers were already planning the next phase of the operation, certain that the fight against organized crime would require perseverance and strategy. With the suspects detained and the motorcycle seized, the operation continued on its course toward the station. Along the way, the team exchanged information about the next steps. The operation leader, an experienced officer, knew it was crucial to investigate the suspects' connections to other criminal activities such as drug trafficking and cargo theft, which were common in the area. Upon arriving at the station, the officers began the process of registering the seizures. The motorcycles without plates and with altered serial numbers would be taken to the yard for further forensic analysis. The forensic experts, specialized in stolen vehicles, would confirm suspicions of tampering and check for connections to other vehicle theft cases. Meanwhile, the detained minors were sent to juvenile court, where they would face charges for their infractions. One of the most tense moments occurred when one of the suspects, already inside the station, tried to resist as he was taken to his cell. In desperation, he began to shout, claiming the motorcycle was borrowed and that he didn't know it had been tampered with. However, the individual's criminal record, which included previous offenses for receiving stolen goods and involvement in drug trafficking, left no doubt about his involvement in illegal activities. The officers, prepared for such situations, restrained him and firmly escorted him to detention. The investigative team also took the opportunity to examine the suspect's cell phones with the proper judicial authorization. Recent messages and calls revealed contacts with other gang members who might be involved in larger schemes of theft and drug trafficking. These details would be crucial for future operations, allowing more parts of the criminal group to be dismantled. By the end of the night, the first conclusions of the operation began to take shape. Besides the recovered motorcycles, the police discovered that the detained youths were mules used by the gang leaders to ride the stolen vehicles and commit robberies or deliver drugs. The coordinating officer emphasized the importance of thoroughly investigating these individuals and finding the higher-ups who hid behind the soldiers of crime. The operation also caught the attention of the local press, which began reporting on the seized motorcycles and detained criminals. This generated a feeling of safety and relief in the community, which had suffered from the violence caused by these criminal groups. The following day, the police would continue monitoring the operation's developments, while the suspects were brought before justice. The vehicle forensics would provide new evidence, and cooperation with other departments, such as police intelligence, would help map out the broader operations of this gang in Sao Paulo. Although the operation had ended successfully, the officers knew that combating crime was an ongoing process. More arrests and seizures would follow, and the city could count on the determination of these teams to ensure greater safety on the streets. The following morning, the results of the police operation began to become clearer. The seized motorcycles had already undergone forensic analysis, which confirmed the tampering. Some of the motorcycles were even linked to violent robberies committed in the city weeks earlier. These findings reinforced the importance of the operation and the need to continue the investigations. The commanding officer gathered the team to discuss the next steps. In addition to the arrests made, the information collected from the suspects' cell phones indicated that there were more gang members operating in other parts of the city, particularly in the east zone of Sao Paulo. The operation leaders began planning a new phase, involving search and seizure warrants at homes and businesses suspected of serving as sales points and receivers of stolen motorcycles. Among those detained, one individual revealed during interrogation crucial details about the gang's organization. He described how the leaders used young people to ride the stolen motorcycles and make drug deliveries while staying hidden and protected. According to him, the gang leaders rarely appeared in public, using intermediaries to carry out criminal transactions. With this new information, the police team intensified their intelligence efforts to map the routes used by the criminals. The investigations pointed to a scheme that involved vehicle thefts in other cities, which were then altered in clandestine workshops in the capital before being sold on the black market or used in crimes such as robberies and drug trafficking. In the following days, new coordinated actions between the civil and military police were carried out. Specialized tactical patrol teams, supported by vehicles and helicopters, surrounded strategic points where the gang operated. These operations resulted in the seizure of more stolen vehicles, motorcycle parts, and even weapons used by the criminals. The operation's impact was enormous. The local media continued to closely follow the developments, giving the results prominent coverage. the sense of security among the population increased, especially in the areas most affected by the gang's actions. Residents of neighborhoods in the north and south zones of Sao Paulo, who previously feared going out at certain times due to the crimes, began reporting a decrease in criminal activity in those regions. As the new phases of the operation progressed, prosecutors were already preparing charges against the detained criminals. The collected evidence, including text messages, call records, and the tampered vehicles, formed a solid case against those involved. The key gang members would face serious charges, including gang formation, receiving stolen goods, drug trafficking, and vehicle theft. At the close of one of the meetings, the commanding officer thanked the team's dedication and emphasized that this was just one victory in a much larger battle against organized crime. The gang had suffered a major blow, but he knew new challenges would arise. "Crime doesn't stop," he said, "and neither will we." The team agreed in unison, knowing that the operation's success was only possible thanks to the determination of each person present. What initially seemed like a simple operation against motorcycle theft ended up dismantling a complex and organized criminal network, bringing a little more peace to the streets of Sao Paulo and restoring the public's confidence in the work of the security forces. As the police continued their efforts to dismantle the network, they knew that victory in the fight against organized crime came in stages. While the immediate threat posed by the gang's activities was contained, the investigation was far from over. The next few weeks would be crucial in following up on the leads provided by the detained individuals, mapping out the network's broader reach, and continuing to track down other involved parties. One key focus was the workshops where stolen vehicles were modified. These workshops were a vital link in the gang's operations. They were responsible for altering serial numbers, changing license plates, and in some cases, completely stripping down vehicles to be sold as parts. Detectives working the case had begun coordinating with specialized auto theft units to identify these workshops. Through undercover operations and surveillance, they managed to locate several suspect garages that had been operating under the radar in Sao Paulo's peripheral neighborhoods. One such workshop was raided the following week in a pre-dawn operation. The police had obtained a search warrant after weeks of monitoring suspicious activities. Upon entering the premises, they found a treasure trove of stolen vehicles in various stages of disassembly, along with counterfeit parts and tools used to tamper with vehicle identification numbers. Arrests were made on site, and several workers were detained, though the owners of the garage had managed to escape moments before the raid. Among the detained workers was a mechanic who had been involved with the gang for years. Realizing the severity of the charges he was facing, he decided to cooperate with the authorities in exchange for leniency. His testimony was crucial in exposing the larger network of stolen vehicle operations, not just in Sao Paulo, but across other cities like Campinas, Guarulhos, and even as far as Rio de Janeiro. He revealed that the stolen motorcycles and cars were often moved across state lines, where they were either sold in smaller towns or exported illegally to neighboring countries. The mechanic's cooperation led to a new phase of the investigation. A broader, regional task force was formed to coordinate with police departments in other states, allowing for simultaneous raids on several suspected workshops. The success of these operations struck a significant blow to the criminal enterprise, and over the next few weeks, more arrests were made. However, dismantling the gang was not just about recovering stolen vehicles and arresting mechanics. The police needed to address the financial structure that kept the operation running. Investigations into the financial dealings of the gang members revealed a complex web of money laundering that involved legitimate businesses. Fake invoices, shell companies, and offshore bank accounts were all part of the scheme used to disguise the proceeds from their illegal activities. Detectives began collaborating with financial crime units and the federal police to freeze assets, seize bank accounts, and investigate the accountants and business owners who were complicit in laundering the gang's money. Meanwhile, the community response to the police operations was overwhelmingly positive. Many residents who had been terrorized by the gang's actions now felt safer in their neighborhoods. There was a noticeable decrease in the number of motorcycle-related crimes, and people were more willing to cooperate with the police by providing tips and information about suspicious activities. Yet, despite the progress, the gang leaders, those who orchestrated the entire operation, remained elusive. Known only by their street names, they operated in the shadows, using layers of intermediaries to protect themselves from direct involvement. Police intelligence indicated that these leaders had fled the city and were possibly hiding out in rural areas or smaller towns, using their connections to evade capture. The search for these high-profile targets became the next priority. One of these leaders, known by the alias Chacal, was particularly dangerous. He had been involved in organized crime for over a decade, orchestrating vehicle thefts, drug trafficking, and armed robberies. Police were determined to bring him to justice, but his reputation for ruthlessness made the task all the more difficult. Through a series of wiretaps and informant tips, law enforcement began to close in on his location. The breakthrough came when an informant within the gang provided details about a meeting where Chacal and other gang leaders were planning their next move. The meeting was to take place at a secluded farm outside Sao Paulo, where the leaders hoped to regroup and rebuild their operations. The police immediately prepared a high-risk operation involving both the civil and military police, along with a SWAT team. The raid was planned with precision, and on the night of the meeting, the police made their move. Helicopters hovered above the farm, while ground units surrounded the area, cutting off all escape routes. As the officers stormed the property, gunfire erupted from inside the farmhouse. A tense standoff followed, but the overwhelming force of the police soon brought the situation under control. Several gang members were arrested, and weapons and drugs were seized from the property. Chacal, however, was not among those captured. He had managed to escape during the chaos, likely slipping through the surrounding forest before the police arrived. While the operation was a success in disrupting the gang's leadership, the escape of Chacal meant that the hunt would continue. The police intensified their search, placing him on the most wanted list and offering rewards for information leading to his capture. In the weeks that followed, the investigation shifted its focus toward the remaining gang members still at large. The arrests of key figures and the seizure of their assets had significantly weakened the organization, but the police knew they could not rest until Chacal and the last of his network were brought to justice. As for the community, the impact of the police operations was felt in both tangible and psychological ways. The visible reduction in crime brought relief to residents, but it also served as a reminder of the ongoing struggle against organized crime in Sao Paulo. The authorities, while proud of their achievements, understood that maintaining public trust and safety required a sustained effort, one that would involve not only more police operations but also social programs aimed at preventing young people from being lured into a life of crime. The final chapter of the operation had not yet been written, but the police were determined to finish what they had started. Chacal and his remaining associates would be captured, and the streets of Sao Paulo would be safer for it. The fight was far from over, but each victory brought them one step closer to their ultimate goal, breaking the cycle of crime that